Good afternoon. Thank you for listening to us patiently, and I have a really cool lineup for you. I'm moderating a panel around tomorrow's biggest opportunities for growth, and I have a wonderful set of people with me. So can I introduce, and please, a warm welcome and a fantastic applause will be brilliant here. SC Moatti, Mighty Capital. Please join me on stage. Welcome. You've been on the stage before, so. Zach Karabell from Invest. And last but certainly not least, Paul Asel from NGP Capital. Paul, please join us. How are you doing? So great. We have a terrific lineup here today and some very eclectic people, and I've had the pleasure of spending some time with you earlier today and last night. So we're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about the future. We're going to talk about why you here today as startups, as VCs, as corporations, must consider what these three brilliant people have to share with you today. And we'll have a bit of an open dialogue, if that's okay. So here's the thing. Each one of you comes from a different background in finance, in the technology space, and of course in the consumer space. I'd love you to, maybe starting with Zach, give a bit of a flavor of who you are and what is it that you really care about when it comes to technology and the future and tomorrow's biggest growth opportunities, and we'll take it from there. Is that okay?
Sure, a bit of a flavor of who I am. Oh, wow. Let's see, I have 16 minutes to go into that. Oh,
you got a minute.
That's for the whole panel, right. And by the way, it's great that you got the wireless mic and we got the handheld.
I know.
I think a growth opportunity, there are two growth opportunities that I feel will never be taken up. One is better technology for audio at conferences that isn't either handheld or voice. And the other is better name tags. So if someone could work on like the Google Glass of name tags, because this is all very antediluvian. I don't know who can ever develop this. That's just my 2 cents. If any of you were looking for a company to start, come up with some virtual badge that you can use at conferences that doesn't dangle around your neck and force constant craning of eyes. So in terms of growth, I mean, I will make one just general comment, which is, and I think Paul probably will echo this, and probably SC as well, you know, these are incredible environments. There are lots of companies, I'm sure lots of you are either part of or developing a really dynamic company. And one of the strengths of our system, and our in this case in the United States in particular, is this kind of endless supply of energy and capital to lead to potentially new transformative and dynamic businesses, whether that's very specific B2B businesses serving some sort of embedded industry or some consumer-oriented, we're going to change the world and make it a better place kind of business. That's incredible, and it's a motive force that I think it gives us great strength. The downside is it can get ahead of itself. There can be too many people, too much capital, and too little opportunity. And I don't say that to in any way dampen that. I just say that as I think that's always really important when you're thinking about growth. And I'll finish with one of the most interesting things about having been in and out of financial services for the past 17 or 18 years is I think finance in general, in spite of all the Bitcoin, you guys have heard about this thing, Bitcoin? Anyway, you should look into it. In spite of all the efflorescence of attention to digital currencies, finance remains one of the least disrupted, in a fundamental sense, businesses of any. You would have said that about healthcare and business about 4 or 5,
sure.
6 years ago. I think healthcare is now rapidly being altered by digital records and digital transformation. Finance, it's trickier. I mean, there's a lot of widgets and apps that go into mobile banking or go into financial wellness and planning, and there's a lot of data and a lot of B2B that goes into that. But the essential nuts and bolts of the financial services industry remains, particularly after the financial crisis, remarkably unchanged in terms of large banks servicing people in the United States. That's not true in China. It's not true through the rest of the world. And to me, it's a really open question of when or if or how the essential building blocks of financial services in the developed world, I'm not talking about China where it's radically different, when or if that actually changes, even though I do think there's a lot of opportunities to plug into and alter the digital and mobile experience. I'm not sure how much is going to change in that world.
So Zach, thank you for that. So I've read a lot of your work. You're an eloquent speaker and a great writer, and you talk a lot about emerging markets. You talk about the opportunities that exist in China. Hold that thought, because I want to weave the conversation back in. Essie, different worlds, the consumer world, the mobile world, very exciting in its own right. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth tomorrow, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, whatever the timeline?
Yes, absolutely. Essie Moatti, I'm the founder of Mighty Capital and Products That Count, one of the largest networks of early adopters in the world. The way that I think about innovation is, my expertise is mobility and connected technology. So I look at what is going to happen with the third wave of connected innovation. The first wave is put a phone in every hand. The second wave is collect data about everything and everyone. We're experiencing the pain of it right now with all the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica scandals. And then third wave is, okay, now that you have that, do something useful. Disrupt, one, the enterprise, and that's like an endless undertaking, and two, our health system, which is in need of so much change and innovation. Yeah. And then as you do this, you also disrupt the underlying infrastructure that supports our economic ecosystem and our health ecosystem. Now that's sort of in a timeline of innovation that's based on technology trends and consumer trends. Sure. My eyes are definitely on China because of mobility. But I also think about, when you create a new service, how do you think about making something really innovative? And whether it's 5, 10, or 20 years, it comes back to our technology products have become extensions of ourselves. And so when we think about what it takes to build a great product or disrupt an industry, we have to come back to who are we when we are our best selves. And then I think about mind, body, spirit framework to describe that, right? So we all want to look good. We're all going to build products that also are beautiful. And what's behind that is a lot more than, pretty pictures. We all want to have meanings in our lives. So we're all going to build products that give us meaning and are very personalized. And then finally, we all want to grow and evolve and change, and we need products that are going to do that with us.
Sure. So yourself, the best version of yourself, is an important narrative here, because consumer technology and the extension of new technologies on our body is going to, and the mobile device that I'm holding here today, which is for some people very antisocial, but it's my way of reading things, is going to be the future. I'm going to come back to you in terms of what you feel bullish about in a second, because I'm going to hold you to one or two areas that the audience would want you to commit to, that you believe is going to be most disruptive for you personally, and we'll come back to that in a second. Paul, so you've got a really cool job. You've spent the last 15 years running a very cool gig with NGP Capital. You're going to tell us all about it. Please tell us, what is your horizon? Where are you betting big? Where are you putting the money? What do you think the disruption is going to be as part of your journey in technology?
So NGP Capital is a global venture firm, 1.2 billion under management. We're investing in Asia, Europe, and the US. And when I started in the venture business about 25 years ago, we used to have the one bridge rule in Silicon Valley, which is if an investment involves crossing a bridge, it's too far. We now have the two flight rule, which is if there's an investment within 2 flights, it's fair game. And it really is exciting to see the global innovation that we're seeing now. And that together with a combination of cloud, mobile, sensor, and intelligence, I think really creates opportunities for us to do some things that are fundamentally different. Yeah. Technology has historically been primarily an enabler of enterprise and industry, and we now have the capital and the wherewithal to be able to disrupt many vertical industries. One of the things we've heard from McKinsey, for example, is that the internet touched 15% of GDP. The IoT has the opportunity to impact the rest, and that's part of what we're investing behind.
Fantastic. And is there I'm going to stay with you for now, is there a story, is there an example or an investment that you've made that you believe is upholding your statement today that you'd like to share with us? And I'll share, weave back to the others.
I could pick probably 20 investments, but I'll just pick one, which is a company called WorkFusion in New York. And that's interesting for a couple reasons. One is it's a global company from the very start. The headquarters are in New York, but the development team is in Belarus. Tremendous mathematical capabilities that are coming out of that, really tapping a global expertise. The second thing is WorkFusion is automating rote, complex tasks, using artificial intelligence to literally disrupt and replace people, but it's doing so with a human-in-the-loop process. We're very much a believer of artificial intelligence not as a black box, but as augmented intelligence, where it's augmenting our expertise. Yeah. I think there's at least 3 or 4 things there that are emblematic of opportunities across a class of companies.
Yeah, fantastic. So WorkFusion, great example. RPA, AI-based companies doing a fantastic job. So if we think about artificial intelligence, it's a big term, of course. So many people would have used it today, and it means a lot of different things to different people. Zach, you talk a lot about wealth management, you talk about investment, you have viewpoints on markets like China, we talked about that earlier. What do you think is going to potentially derail the future? Let's pick a technology area or a domain that you feel excited about. What do you think is going to disturb the predictions? And what are the things we need to be thinking about as a unit, as a team here?
So, small question. Look, I think in general, some of this comes down to what temperament you have as an individual,
Sure.
because there's really no way of knowing what the arc of human history is going to be, other than the fact that if it's been a neck-and-neck race about the incredible human capacity to destroy and the remarkable human ability to create, we're still here talking about it, and so clearly the create part has narrowly inched out the destroy part. In terms of the future and the derailing, look, I am someone who is more prone to the cup half full view, which means I think we're in the middle of a remarkable global transformation of an emergence of what we call a global middle class that we are still not even halfway through, whatever that means. And I'm not sure much is going to derail that. I don't know if really, between China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, certain select portions of sub-Saharan Africa, if anything's going to get in the way of those societies' collective capacity to improve and augment their worlds. The developing world with aging populations and plateauing demographics have different challenges of both meaning and division of spoils, and I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge as it is already. Whether or not the conviction of being able to solve certain problems, which I think is an ineluctable and imperative ingredient for growth, this collective energy in this room of, look, we have issues that we can solve, that to me is an actual necessary ingredient, and I'm not sure if it is in nearly as much abundant supply within the United States as it used to be, and that I think is probably a challenge. That's a much more metaphysical answer than like where do you put your money, but at least it's a starting framework for some of it.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold you to one more thing. So if you were a betting man, maybe you are, imagine you are for a second, and you would say there is one domain, one technology area, one region, one innovation, area that you feel bullish about. Where would you put your cash, whatever the cash, however big or small?
Yeah, I would decline that bet.
You decline the bet?
I would, adamantly, and I would assert my God-given right to do so. Like I don't think that it's either possible or feasible to find that one, golden ticket. And yes, if everyone knew that Google was going to be Google, now, then. But even that is part of a matrix of a lot of other solutions, and where that's going to stand, everything looks huge when it's huge, right? In retrospect, it doesn't. Look at a list of the Fortune 500 in 1950, and you'll find, or the Fortune 50 in 1950, and you'll find 3 or 4 incumbents that have survived that time. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you defected that nicely. SC.
I'll take that one.
You want to take that one?
So my eyes are on the health industry. Whether you look at macro trend or technology trend, there is so much there, so much potential for innovation and disruption. The macro trends are our system was built for big, diseases and that affected us throughout at the end of our life, or that basically ended our lives. And how do we treat them on a point-by-point basis? Today, 75% of the health budget goes to the treatment of chronic diseases. So we've completely transformed the way we are healthy or not healthy and go in and out of that. And that needs to be addressed at a systemic level. And then if I look at technology trend, I see a huge wave of disruption coming from genomics as a platform, leading to massive amounts of data, changing the way we think about health. And then I think of AI and love Work Fusion and Max Yankelevich, but I think of AI as a technology that's also going to really change the way we think about health and health outcomes.
So that's fantastic. So big focus on humanity and the progression of humanity, maybe the singularity, who knows, but healthcare, pharmaceuticals, us being well over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years is so important. And of course, that is a domain that you're playing in and you're operating and you care about. I'm just going to come back to you in a second. Paul, we chatted earlier on when I was having a coffee, and you said something really interesting. You're backing a bunch of companies in different parts of the world, and we talked about talent and regulation, and I asked you, what's going to derail? You had a fantastic answer. Would you just share that with us? And then, a little bit more dialogue, and I'm running out of time as well, but please. So what's going to derail the predictions, the investments that you're betting big on, and what are the factors that we should consider, all of us here?
Thanks. And before I do that, I'd like to tag on to SC's comment here. In the last century, our lives have increased by about 0.4 years every year. We've gone from an average life expectancy from about 40 to now 80 years old. If we think about the opportunities in health and wellness, I see two. One is not only the prolongation of life, but making our lives more productive, more effective throughout our whole life cycle. And the second is we're also focusing on commute and transportation. We spend over 1 hour a day on average commuting. And if we can find ways to automate that, make that more productive, then we are bringing back in productive times in our lives. To your point, what can derail that? We've been looking a lot at the transportation sector, and we've seen this in finance, which you've mentioned. We've seen this in health, that state and local regulation is a key to being able to accelerate and take advantage of the technology that we have. One of the potential concerns here is that looser regulatory environments such as China would allow them to leapfrog some of the innovation, some of these areas ahead of the U.S.
Sure.
Just one thing on that. It is clear that there's a lot of things that will change profoundly in the next decades. I could say, look, peer-to-peer payments that don't run through centralized banks is a need that people have. A lot of people are meeting with Venmo or other types of payments that could become much more expensive over time. It will happen because a lot of different companies and a lot of different people attempt to chip away at an embedded structure and come up with different ideas. And frankly, the vast preponderance of those will collapse, will not work. And then something will. So there's one thing to say, look, there's an arc here that you can look at. It's really difficult, as these guys know better than I do, to find the company or companies that are going to be part of that are also going to be viable. Remember, almost all the railroads in the 19th century went bankrupt.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the railroads themselves were a failure. So it's a really challenging thing to line up.
Yeah, absolutely. Final points, and then we've got to close off. I know we're done for time.
One more area that I'm very bullish on is the domain of analytics, and I'm very bullish on it because right now we're at this point where we've sort of analyzed our data to death, and I think that what we're seeing right now is a trend where we're bringing back a lot more creativity into analysis, and I'm looking forward to see a lot of innovation across many industries around that.
Yeah, fantastic. So as I close off, firstly, thank you so much for the dialogue. Time runs out very quickly here, but really enjoyed the conversations and the input, Zach, Paul, SC. I'll close off by saying Oscar Wilde talks about how be yourself, everyone and everyone out there is already taken, and your uniqueness, your creativity, doing things that others fear doing is going to be a catalyst for the next big opportunities that we see out there for growth. All of you are, entrepreneurs and startups out there today. So hopefully you took a bit of inspiration today. Thank you so much for your time, and please give these guys a round of applause. I really appreciate it. Excellent. Thank you.